Hello and welcome to This is 65. My name is Erin Ackenheil and I own Blackpoint Insurance. At Blackpoint, we help Medicare beneficiaries nationwide learn about the A, B, C's, and D's of Medicare. And through that process, we meet some amazing people, inspirational journeys, authors, mentors, people who are in their encore careers, people who have important information to share with all of you. And here on This is 65, we can bring you their stories. And today's guest is incredible. She has an amazing journey to share. Morgan Meadows is a consultant, an educator, a writer, and most importantly, a survivor. And she's going to talk through all the things that she's been through and how she's become just an inspirational figure in our communities. And there's so many ways to follow and learn her story. She was a single mom. She raised 4 kids on her own. She's an entrepreneur, she's a mentor, and she's more. She's just so much more. And she brings her incredible story to us today. She's committed to a lifelong journey of educating herself and helping others. Please welcome from backstage, welcome Morgan Meadows. Welcome, Morgan. How are you?
I am wonderful and good morning. We have most perfect day here on Orcas Island. I'm in the little community of Olga, moved here in January. So I'm in a wonderful transition, but I did live on this island in another small community for 14 years where I raised my kids.
Incredible. I mean, I'm just looking out the window and I'm feeling jealous completely. Beautiful over there. So
I'm on the second floor of a 3rd-story custom made home by my sweetheart, who we've known each other 20 years, but just became a couple officially in December.
Wow, that's the best way. Friends become official couples. I love it. Perfect.
Yeah.
So Morgan, tell me about your background. You know, I know you have an incredible story. Tell it to us. Tell us what happened.
Well, I am happy to say I am 65 years young. I am a bicyclist, not a competitor, but a bicyclist because that is one of the ways I learned to nurture myself physically as I learned to become my own person at a young age, despite some very traumatic things. I have lived in more places than I am years young.
Wow, that's
And
unreal.
I've also lived in some places for the longest I've lived in one place is here on the islands, 15 years. But even then, I've lived in quite a few little places until it took a while to get established as a single mom. And that called up my entrepreneurial spirit and life goals into new functions. But what I experienced was being trafficked as a child and a young adult from the ages of 3 to 23.
My God.
I began to focus on a healing journey after I was able to escape from my first husband, which was an arranged marriage. I was raised in a cult and that looked very good on the outside, and yet the family dynamics and addictions that were in my family and the religious requirements were such that being able to break away took me 5 times. But I finally was able to do it at the age of 29. And there was just miracles upon miracles in my life. The fact that I have been able to become resilient, I attribute this greatly to the kindness of strangers and to to not losing my curiosity and love of learning, because I had to do a lot of self-teaching. I didn't start college until I was 33. I had a big gap. I was taken out of school at 16, missed a lot of school growing up with all those moves and times I was out of commission as a child, so to speak. And then I kept a couple of things secret to myself, which is my creativity, my artistry, and my love of poetry, which was one of the ways that I kept my mind active during traumatic events. Also, I did have the skill of dissociation, which many children get. but I wasn't a person who was fractured into multiple personalities, which I have to say I am so grateful for. The trafficking part, and I mean, I feel emotion even just now. I almost can't believe, despite having more years of my life that have been good than bad, I sometimes still can't believe how blessed I am to be able
Right.
to look out this window, to look at the clouds in this beautiful sky, to know that garden work is happening in this garden I'm restoring today, to know I'm in the company of friends and a later in life sweetheart, four healthy children that are all independent, living in Seattle, not so far away. I I feel like I have been given so many miracles, and I want that to be my story. The
Right.
grace, the grace that has enabled me to not just survive, but to become curious in my master's and doctorate work, which I started much later in life, on resilience, the resilience of survivors.
Right. Well, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, it's amazing where you've landed considering how you started, right? Tell me just a little bit, what area did you grow up in? Were you with both of your parents? What was the backdrop of your childhood?
Okay, my mother was has passed, and so has my stepfather and my father. My real father I met when I was 27, so he was not involved in my upbringing at all. In fact, in no way. I was the second of his 8 children, and my mother was only 17 when she had my brother and 19 when she had me. So she was a young, very young mother who didn't want to be a mother. She also was in an arranged marriage, a different religious background. My grandpa had been raised Mormon, and even though they didn't attend Mormon meetings, my mother and my aunt were raised very much according to many of the Mormon philosophies and religious edicts about women's role. So my mother was married off at 16, and she, that was in 1957, or let's see, no, she was born in 40, so that would have been 56. And then,
Very young.
she had my brother in 57 or 50. I can't remember. Sorry. Um,
Close
so
enough.
close enough. And so she was very, very, in a way, I would say, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way, but I think we have enough awareness publicly that when a person gets involved in addiction and escapism, they kind of don't grow emotionally. And in many ways, I would say my mom probably hovered between sort of 12 and 16 emotionally. And she became fully uh, fully addicted to pharmaceuticals and alcohol when she was 23, which made me about 6 or 7. So, or no, I apologize for that. I was born in 59, so that would make me 4 or 5. But I can remember more when I get to 6 or 7. So,
Sure.
and I don't think my mother was fully aware of many of the things that happened to myself and possibly to my brothers, but because I was gone from the home for large chunks of time. Um, and then when I was not in school, I was often at home helping her to cope. So I had to learn a lot to take care of a
Right.
home at a very young age. And so I just became as curious as I could be about what life might be like if my circumstances were different. And I have to say that I didn't become bitter. And I think that is because I did learn from the kindness of strangers that there's something bigger in this universe that
Right.
does watch over us. And I can't articulate fully what that is outside of my blog and my journals, but I do know there's a presence that connects with us, whether it's our soul, our guides, but I just know that I've had a lot of intuitive help to reach for the things that got me out of what was harmful, and did it in such a way that I never felt vengeful or retaliatory to those who were involved, whether innocently or more intentionally.
It's a real gift, really, to be able to leave that situation without bitterness and be able to kind of go forward and see the positive. You mentioned that when you were 29, you finally kind of escaped this, right? Arranged marriage and all that you had
Yeah.
gone through, and what was the catalyst for that? I mean, how did you sort of escape? And you mentioned the kindness of strangers. Is there anything that stands out in particular that kind of inspired you to move forward and to get out of that situation?
Well, if any of our listeners ever suspect that they are observing a child or a young adult or even a full adult who may be in the trap of trafficking or some highly controlled group, um, if someone had come up to me in any of those years until I was 29 and said, "Are you in a cult? Are you okay? Can I help you?" I would have frozen. I would not have known how to ask for help because the circumstances make it pretty much impossible for you to know how to get help because there's no trust. But with more awareness today and in restrooms now, in many restaurants and other places of business, there's trafficking hotlines. But even just being able to ask someone, "Is there any way that I can help you today? Could you use a ride? Do you need to use a phone? Do you need a meal?" That kind of kindness, because even in like the medical profession, quite often the emergency room, professionals are seeing survivors who have been through difficulties and are physically very traumatized and needing attention, and they have already learned not to say anything about their needs. So being able to educate first line people, even if it's someone like yourself who happens to just be on a trip and you just feel there's something about a situation that doesn't ring safe, you can call hotline and they'll talk you through what to do so
Yeah,
that
that's
you are
incredible.
never in danger, because that is a very real possibility. When I asked for help, that was what was successful, because the first four times I escaped, I was found within 24 hours
So you kind of
because it
ran
never
away, and
involved
then
anybody
he
else. I
located
never
you.
told anybody what was happening.
Yeah.
And then there came a point at which I realized if I didn't make the effort, all or nothing effort, it was never going to happen. And I was going to have to enlist help. And it took two different couples, a younger couple closer to my age and an older couple who I lived with for 8 months, to protect me and put me on the right path. And I had two dreams. I wanted to pursue an education and heal through that, which I have. And that included therapy, a lot of very beautiful, good therapy. And I wanted to be a mom. And I didn't
And you
want
weren't
to
a
be,
mom at that point,
I
right?
wanted
You
to
were
be a mom. No, thank goodness. No, I didn't become a mom until I was 35. And
fantastic. That's great that you got to be healed before that happened. I love it.
I would not have allowed myself to become a mom because I wanted to make sure that I had healed the dissociative tendencies that we all have if we've been through repetitive trauma. And also, I wanted to be physically healthy, which I was. Even though there were a few times when I can say I remember some kind of substance being used against my will, and some of what happened to me was experimental, not just sex trafficking or domestic labor. But I wanted to know that there was no way anybody could ever have that kind of control over me again, and that I wouldn't pass on anything from my upbringing that might look innocent on the outside, but not be healthy in a parenting
Right.
relationship. So I learned to self-parent first.
Yeah.
And then there was just a time when it was right, and that was 35.
That's amazing. I'm so happy for you that that was to happen. So tell me a little bit, Morgan. Tell me about a lucid tree. What is the goal of your organization? How did you start it? What's this all about?
That's kind of fun. So a lucid tree is my consulting LLC. And I had it on pause here in Washington while I spent almost 3 years in Sebastopol, California, because I wasn't sure how I wanted to go forward. But so now, a lucid tree, it's my consulting on issues of education within boards, within mostly agencies that are uh, helping with the response to trafficking, or in the case of island stewards, which I'm the president of the board right now, is to help reset the board to be able to handle a larger expansion in the community, in the communities it serves, which is just in this county. So I much prefer working in a uh, smaller sense of population. I am very uncomfortable in a highly urbanized setting. Here, I can expand, but I really like the education, the one-on-one, the small groups. I'm getting better at trusting the social media of this type of process because I was filmed as a child in pornography. And so that took a long time for me to begin to feel that I could actually have ownership of this kind of process and participate with joy, which is the way I feel today.
100%. So, when you're educating small groups or talking on, behalf of your organization, what does that look like? Are you guiding victims or are you helping people be more aware of what to look for or both? How does it kind of work?
Well, before I chose the name of Lucid Tree Consulting, which or Lucid Tree LLC, I did that when I was in Wisconsin after I had left the island in 2017 to establish myself in Wisconsin, where at the time they were fifth on the list of 25 worst states for human trafficking. And I was
Wow.
invited there by someone to come and to start doing presentations. I am a Shared Hope ambassador, so I've had training with them, and I have worked closely with a couple of key sexual assault and domestic violence agencies. I actually started off helping with accreditation preparation so I could learn the ins and outs of how these organizations are made safe, how they get their funding, how you become a mandatory reporter, which I am. Um, but ultimately, I did all of that so that I could work behind the scenes, because for me, I want to protect myself as a survivor from becoming triggered so much that I might not be helpful.
Right.
So presentations, question and answer, private consultations, and my doctoral research, I actually just in January of 2023, I paused my doctoral dissertation because I couldn't get my university to agree to let me pursue my study design of 36 people, which would have been 12 women survivors of both child or slash forced marriage and trafficking, men, because it does happen to men as boys and young adults, and then 12 therapists. So
Wow.
I created this beautiful design, and my IRB team uh, couldn't proceed with it because they wanted it to be a bit simpler. And I wanted to go the distance. At my age, It's
Right.
like, this really matters to me. So I put it
And
on
it's not
pause.
simple, it's complicated,
It's
you know?
very complicated, and also putting in place all of, I mean, I'm certified to do the study. I've taken the coursework I've needed to do this an independent of the university to know how to conduct ethical studies, but I also am a survivor. I got approval to actually include myself as one of the case studies. But ultimately, when I talked to survivors in preparation, it came to our realization that if I write my story, I'll reach more people than if I do an academic study. And from there, let's see what happens. So that's what I'm working on now, is my memoir.
That is amazing. I can't wait to read the whole thing. That's going to be incredible. So, when I think about it, Morgan, I feel like now you're right. Things are a little better in the sense that, you see the signs in the airport. I see this in restaurants. What are the warning signs that people should be looking for of potential trafficking? What would be a trigger beyond the obvious, so to speak, that there's a watch out there, and what should we do to take action?
Right. Um, there are, I would encourage people to go to Shared Hope International, to their website, which is just sharedhope.org. The field of domestic commercial sex trafficking is very well understood through that site. Another one would be the Tahare Justice Center. They have wonderful help and information on forced marriage and trafficking. They also make sure that there are shelters and legal support at no cost. So those are wonderful starting places. And Polaris Project, they have an amazing document called I think it's the high pathways and byways to understand the 25 industries in the United States and also worldwide, but in the United States, for how trafficking happens. And these are crucial because you can read them without being traumatized. You could read these developed sites and their pamphlets and booklets. And that is a good primer, because in the media, it is often the trauma, like in the news, the trauma that people hear about, and just a limited pathway of how trafficking happens. People think it's, always about abduction, but it's a lot of deception. And many times it can take 2 or 3 years for a target to become trafficked. And it's not done by strangers as much as you think. It's predominantly done by people that the a victim knows, that a community knows. And I don't know. I know I'm going to be very careful to not implicate any kind of agencies other around that. But there are some wonderful documentaries and true to life films as well that show how some agencies, or, well, I'll say the motel industry. That's one that uh, there is a concerted effort now for people in the motel industry to educate their employees on how to spot evidence of trafficking in the use of the motels. Restaurants now are beginning to do in-house education with their wait staff. Um, Truck drivers, when I was in Wisconsin before my car accident, in 2018, 2019, and 2020, I was invited by the public policy office to begin to educate the legislative session, several different committees for 3 different bills, to again help with this issue of community education, um, in schools, in religious communities, in academic communities. There's been wonderful work done by so many agencies that are just specific to their county or just specific to their state, So become aware of what's going on around you, because likely there's a domestic violence and sexual assault agency in your community within 100 miles that is going to be able to point you in the direction of what their local training is. But there's also online resources. So, but for individuals like myself, where it was done within the family, done within the church, um, there are political groups that are now identified as cults. Oh, one of my favorite colleagues, who I've not met him personally, but I highly recommend his work. He's only a couple of years older than myself. He is it's Dr. Stephen Hassan. His site is freedomofmind.com. And he has a wonderful podcast called The Influence Continuum. And that really is a powerful tool to listen to all of these wonderful people who, similar to myself, managed to escape. Talk about the kindness of strangers, the grace, the way their mind used to work when they were being highly controlled, and how they were able to break free, and how they've been able to write their story or become very public about how to recover and to look for all of these different ways in which it manifests. Because we're in such a scary at times and unique political and economic climate. So instead of seeing a decline of cult and trafficking, we are seeing an increase. And to understand it, you have to hear from different avenues. Many survivors certainly do have the scenario you see in films. But I feel from my research and my life experience that maybe that's 30%. So that's just my opinion. But I've met so many other survivors who had very similar circumstances to myself, who to this day will not reveal in a public way. For myself, I prepared my children from the time my youngest was about 12. I told them very few things about my story, but I gave them categories. Then, of course, by then, and which was my youngest was 12 in 2012, they began to do their own research. And also because I was doing education on this island and beyond from 2015, that's when I came out publicly.
Right. That
In
took
my
so much
first
courage to do.
yeah, that I prepared a few members of my community and my children that I was going to do that after I got deeper into my doctorate. So I finally felt like I had enough of an educated voice to where I could and practice in presenting. I had been doing a leadership program here in the islands called Leadership San Juan Islands. I was the co-director for several years. I finally felt like I had crossed the threshold of self-doubt and insecurity about how people might respond, to knowing that this mother who showed up with her 4 kids in this beautiful island setting, who was involved in homeschooling communities and teaching and doing a master's and then doing a doctorate, that I had this background. And some people felt betrayed at first when I came out into the open, but that didn't last very long. It's that we tend to get an impression of someone and we might marginalize them without even realizing that that's what we're doing because we're afraid to know.
Right.
And I guess I would encourage people to be really careful of your sources of information, but learn what's happening locally, who the people are to contact, because there are nationwide agencies that are so helpful, like the Polaris Project. And there's another one which that escapes me right now, and my notepad's not sitting next to me, that tell you the steps. But there's so much available, and yet the problem has not gone away. And so
Well,
Be
one thing
willing
that I
to
think about, you know,
what you want to have. No?
the thing that stood out to me, Morgan, is that in spite of all the efforts, things are increasing versus decreasing. And I also think that we tend to only see sort of sensationalized type
Yes.
cases in the media, and what you're driving home is that it's a lot closer to home, right? It's your friends, it's your family, it's your church, and so forth. And your story, the courage that you have to share your story, because like you said, so many people are hiding it, right? And
Yeah.
it's, we can understand that it's hard to have the courage to come out and tell your story, but I think your story is so important because
Mm. Yeah.
that's where people are going to learn how to see these situations and identify them. And you tell a lot of, I know you're doing your memoir, but you talk a lot in your blog about your story. So can you share with people how they reach see how they visit your
Yes.
blog and get to hear about that?
Yes. Um, so my blog is a lucidtree.blogspot.com. And I feature vignettes about my healing process, things I've learned about resilience, the kindness of strangers, surviving my car accident, and how that made me revisit the healing process. Because when I was able to break away at the age of 29 and heal enough through therapy and vocational rehabilitation to start college at 33 and then become a mother at 35, and I I know that all of that happened because usually there was at least one pivotal person, sometimes someone I didn't even know, who gave me a reference or a meal or a ticket. Um, this is, I started before the internet was doing its thing, right?
Right.
Um, so, and for me to even trust getting involved in the internet, learning how to work with technology, I was very leery of that because my stepfather, who was part of this trauma because of his military background and some other details, which will be in my memoir because of my research and finding out some of these important things about the hierarchy that happens in arrangements in which the person you think is arranging the trafficking scenarios is actually only a person who's being handled, him or herself. So
Right.
it's complex.
It's a
And
web. It's a real web.
yep, and that's one of the reasons why I really want to emphasize people also visiting the Freedom of Mind blog and resource, because he's on it, and he's got people from all kinds of backgrounds and types of situations that have gone on to do so much more than I have been able to do, and yet, and also to be celebratory about life, which is
Right.
very hard to become at times.
Right.
I had 2 years when I made the break and started into therapy. I had, that permission that we give ourselves to go for broke. I'm gonna heal, I mean, we think we want it to happen fast because, okay, it's not, the bad stuff isn't happening anymore. I had 2 years of what they used to call in psychiatry the revolving door syndrome. I'm not sure what it's called right now, but it's where I started flooding. And once I gave myself permission to address it, it wasn't that I didn't know what I had been through. I didn't know what the terms were, right? It's not a person who's being trafficked today. It's not like somebody pulls over in a car uh, and says, "Hey, I'm going to traffic you. You want to take part?" or the grooming process can look really interesting when it's done sort of drip by drip by drip.
That's
You
one
don't
of the things I
realize.
wanted to ask you about, Morgan, because earlier you talked about targeting, right? A person can be targeted 1 to 2 years before anything even happens. And I'm imagining somewhere during that targeting process, this drip by drip type thing happens. Can you tell me just a little bit about what that looks like?
Um, in a in a scenario that would be popular today, would be really praising a young person for how attractive they are and encouraging them to have pictures taken for their own portfolio for the future, and maybe involve telling them they're gonna be invited into an opportunity to be modeling. Or another scenario would be someone who's wanting to come to the US and they're invited to take a domestic job, a domestic service job. And once they get here, it could even be in agriculture, their immigration papers are hijacked, and now they're illegally in the country, and they've risked their life to get here if they've made it that far. And somewhere along the way, they've been tricked. So there's going to be a series of deceptions that, for a person who's not savvy, which most of us when we're young are not, is
Right.
going to be vulnerable and needing that help that turns out to not be help. And then they're in a situation they can't get out of it because they don't know anybody.
Right. Just in terms of everybody out there, I just want to remind you to go to Morgan's blog to visit. Go to elucidtree.blogspot.com. Morgan's also given us some really great insights of some sites we can go to. For instance, sharedhope.org, or a really inspirational person for Morgan herself of freedomofmind.com. She illustrates this as her favorite person that's out there providing information. And so just want to encourage everybody to get educated, get more information, because we can all be part of the solution if we're paying attention and getting educated and knowing what to do. Morgan, when I think about you, I know you've been through so much, right, to survive and thrive and become a mom of 4 kids at 35 after you kind of escaped all of this. And you've been on this track of educating and doing well, and you spent your time in Wisconsin really bringing the education level up in that area because it was such a high risk area. And something happened to you while you were there. Can you talk to us a little bit about? I know you had a 2019 car crash. I think it was near fatal.
Yes.
Tell me about that experience and what happened, and how did you defy the odds?
Well, from the person who turned off my car when the car accident happened, to the medical team that worked with me after I got to the hospital, to the state patrol people who looked at how this accident occurred, everybody kept saying, "You must not be done yet because there's no reason why you should have lived." So I was on the interstate in Wisconsin on the outskirts of Green Bay, and I lived in Door County at the time and had only been in the state 2 years, and was in my first 9 to 10 months of really active legislative education, and doing around the state presentations with a presenting team, and enjoying it. And on this particular day, I was coming back from an interview with an association to become an associate of. I'm not a Catholic, but it was part of my presenting team that they wanted to open up to me some resources so that I could even go out of the country and start to do some other internship types of things in India with their support. So I had this beautiful interview, and I was coming back from that, and I was with the traffic, and a fully loaded commercial dump truck pulled from a side road onto the interstate into the fast lane from a dead stop. And as heavy as that was, like 57,000 pounds, and my little 2,000-pound Honda Accord, I could not get out of my lane to avoid impact. And I actually thought when I slammed on my brakes that I was going to be able to avoid impact with the truck, and be hit from behind. I wasn't hit from behind. I hit this truck in the double high rubber tires, which caused my car to go airborne, and flew over the right lane of traffic and spun in the air and landed on its roof and then rolled some more. And I had an amazing near death experience because of those kinds of impacts. I wound up trapped, well, banged around, and the airbag didn't inflate immediately. So I had a lot of physical trauma. And then I was trapped in a very odd position, partly hanging out of the car, and could not help myself. But I also was out of body by then. And so I have memories that are body memories, but also the muscle memory that I still work with and healing. But I still do yoga, and I had to learn to do modified things. And I had 6 spinal fractures, among other things, a lot of blunt trauma to the visceral organs. But I only wound up with 1 surgery on my head, external, not internal. I had nothing, no, beyond contra coup, no internal damage. So it's been a big journey for 6 years.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, from what I understand and just looking at your history a little bit, you not only survived when most people would not, right? You obviously had something left to give, but you recovered super fast. Like, what do you attribute that to? In terms of, I mean, it's an ongoing recovery, but in terms of how you bounce back, it seems like you were able to bounce back really quickly. What do you think that's about?
I was able to very wobbly get on my bicycle 11 months and 2 weeks after the car accident. My poor physical therapist at the time was biting his fingernails on the day I walked my bicycle over and said, "Show me how to do this," because I had no range of motion in my neck yet. And I had just had all these braces taken off a couple of months before. So I just had a list of things I want to do. And the doctors told me that if I had not been so, I'm trying to think of the word, when you have like a gymnast or a dancer has flexibility. I have been a yoga practitioner for many years and had to start from zero after, a certain part of recovery. But that day of the accident, I had done my practice, and I was probably an hour practice every single day. And I meditate. And I also have been a bicyclist and car free for the bulk of the last 15 years. Yeah. So they said that, and I was 58 I was 59 at the time that the accident occurred. So if I hadn't been so flexible from all that yoga, the doctors postulate that flexibility kept me from having what they call an internal decapitation, because even with all of that, my medical records show that my C1 vertebra was 2 millimeters short of being a complete severance.
That's unreal.
So, and I was trapped in this very odd, extreme left position where there was compression and extension, which it took them an hour and 15 minutes to get me out of the car. And fortunately, I wasn't fully in my body during that whole time, and and had other things, which I talk about on my blog, what it was like to have a near-death experience, and I'm still learning from the kindness of people that I didn't know who had medical expertise, the amazing therapies that I have been able to go into. The settlement was a very arduous process that took 2.5 years. My kids had to come out to Wisconsin. A couple of them came out to help me when I came out of the hospital. Actually, I was out of the hospital in 19 days, 5 days where I was in ICU, and 11 days I didn't even touch the floor with my feet. So I don't know what to attribute my speedy recovery, because by the time I started occupational therapy in the hospital. Um, all I know is they brought in a wheelchair, and I said, no, I want to start with a walker. And the eyebrows raised. And I said, I can always choose that, but let me choose this to start because I want to know. I've been imagining doing it with the walker. I want to see if I can do it. So my first time stepping off that bed, my feet touching the floor was all tingles. I didn't have any damage below the hips, but I had been horizontal, right, for 11 days,
That's a long
5 of
time.
them ICU, and it was painful, and I couldn't stand up straight. I was bent over as if I had already become a crone and was over 100 years old. But I was so happy that I was upright. And I also asked for a therapist to come to see me while I was in the hospital. And we created a plan of action and transferred me to a different therapist when I was out. And I feel that if I had not had done all of the therapeutic work and education about resilience before this accident, I might have succumbed to depression. I think it because it did trigger a lot of old memories that were ready to be finished,
Hmm.
that were not about the crash, but about really difficult
Just
trauma.
really drums up everything that you've
It
been through.
does. But the difference is before I had such devastating physical trauma, like that car accident, I had the psychological and emotional framework from my earlier healing work and from being a mother and becoming a single mother and going through legal processes to and by becoming a first time homeowner and all kinds of things. Like, there were grooves of resilience that had been building up in my lifetime, but that car accident recovery has been a whole new level
Right.
of, because if you don't have your body in really healthy condition, it's going to be harder to
It
come
is.
back, and
When I think of you, Morgan, I just think resilience, survivor, hope, inspiration, and those I think are the characteristics, honestly, that got you through this. And somehow you see that pot at the end of the rainbow through everything, and that is incredible. Not everybody has that ability, and I think that's why you're such a gift to
um,
everyone out there with what you bring. And I'm excited. I was going to ask you what's next for you, but I think the memoir is what's coming. So, what's the timeline on the memoir? When do we get to read this gem?
well, it's so scary to say a timeline. All I can say is that I have the entire table of contents done and the first few chapters and outlines for the others, and it is moving along. I actually came up here in October to stay with my friend who's now my partner to just give myself a writing retreat, and I do have a writing coach. um, I'm afraid to put a timeline on it because it probably is going to be 3 books. The first one, I can tell you the title, and it is the Face Painter of Orcas Island. And that is going to show people the person I became as a single mom and an artist and an islander, and the way my children and I grew and developed in this beautiful community. And then how, at a certain point, when I was finally ready, I could begin to start to tell people and do the education. So that's book 2. But the
Yeah.
first book is really the kindness of strangers and travel and wake up calls, and how my children, their innocence, their curiosity, their natural love of life, their births, their questions.
Wonderful. I'm excited to read it. So when it comes out, you're going to have to come back on the show. We're going to definitely read it and help promote you, because I think you have a really great story to share. I mean, and it's not great in the sense of, it's a lot of trauma, right? But it's great
Yeah.
in the sense that you've shown time and again resilience and, not only the kindness of strangers, but your openness to connect with them and figuring this out and getting on the path. It's a real inspiration. And I know you're very accessible to people who have questions. If
Yes.
somebody wanted to reach out to you directly, Morgan, what's the best way to reach you?
I'd like to start with email, and then that address is alucidtree@gmail.com. alucidtree@gmail.com.
Perfect. And start out with a conversation via email, and then if more needs to be done, you'll connect and
Yes.
meet people where they are and help them. So you are an
Yes.
amazing support. I mean, I feel like it's been serendipitous for me to meet you, to be able to share this on my show. I think it's wonderful. And I always ask people, whatever they're doing, I always ask them to reflect and talk about what they would say to their younger selves, right? So what kind of message? And I don't know what time period is the appropriate time period to go back to, but I'm almost thinking more of teenage Morgan. Like if you were to talk to her right at that time when you're kind of figuring out, I have hope, I have dreams, this can't be what it is for me. What would
Yeah.
you say to her if you could go back and talk to her right now? What would you say?
I would say you are going to exceed your highest hopes for what it is to become a whole person. You just don't know it yet. That's what I would have said to my 16-year-old self.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you for sharing with us today. Is there any particular take-home message you want to leave everyone with today?
Never underestimate the power of being observant and reaching out to do something to help someone who you don't know what they're facing, and you might not need to know, but that you honored your own intuitive impulse to put something in motion to help someone reach for the very thing that will get them out of a high control group, a cult, a dangerous relationship, and even addiction.
You've been an absolute wonderful guest, Morgan. Thank you so much for sharing a little piece of your story. I can't wait for the memoir. Thanks for the inspiration and helping and supporting us. And we just really appreciate you joining the show today. Have a fantastic afternoon in your garden.
It was my delight to speak with you. I feel very honored, and my appreciation for the work that you do. You made my transition into Medicare it's almost seamless.
Well, thank you so much, Morgan. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.